In his royal wedding sermon, Michael Careys said some brilliant things and he left out some vital things. To show you both, I thought I'd re-preach his sermon using mostly his words, but also inserting what I think would need to be said if we're going to call this a gospel sermon. I can't promise his delivery, but I can promise that I'll stick to 6 minutes. Are you ready? Here we go. And now in the name of our loving, liberating and life-giving God, Father, Son and Holy Spirit. Amen. From the Song of Solomon in the Old Testament, set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. For love is strong as death, passion fierce as the grave. Its flashes are flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord. And from the New Testament, dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. There's power in love. Don't underestimate it. Don't over-sentimentalize it. There's power in love. If you don't believe me, think about a time when you first fell in love. The whole world seemed to center around you and your beloved. Just look at today. 2 young people fell in love, and we all showed up. Why? The reason has to do with the source. We were made by a power of love, and our lives are meant to be lived in that love. Ultimately, the source of love is God himself, the source of all our own lives, a Father who loves his Son in the fire of the Holy Spirit. That's why Solomon says, love is the very flame of the Lord. When love showed up in the flesh, he was asked by a lawyer to sum up the essence of all the holy teachings that came before. Jesus reached back into the Hebrew scriptures to Deuteronomy and Leviticus and said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. According to Jesus, everything that God has been trying to tell the world is love God and love your neighbors. And when love came in person, he began the most revolutionary movement in human history, all grounded in the unconditional love of God for the world. It's a love that moved the old slaves in America's antebellum South to sing, there is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. And one of the stanzas actually explains why. They said, if you cannot preach like Peter and you cannot pray like Paul, you just tell the love of Jesus, how he died to save us all. Oh, that's the balm in Gilead. This way of love. It is the way of life. They got it. He died to save us all. You see, we need saving from our lovelessness and our unloveliness. Meghan and Harry, you'll find it easy to love each other today, dressed up in fineness, looking like a fairy tale made flesh. But there will come days when it will be hard to love, when your hearts will be revealed to be loveless, dark and broken. On a day like today, it's hard to believe it, but there will come times when you will fight, and it'll feel like hell. Because twisted love, perverted love, corrupted love, that is hell. It's the kind of hell that tears apart marriages and families and nations and souls. And it needs to be quenched, or it will continue to burn. That's hell. What does it take to quench those flames? Well, you'll know if you've ever been in a lover's quarrel. One of you, at least one of you, needs to swallow your pride, to not lash back, to absorb the fire and not dish it out, to begin again in forgiving love. I pray for that kind of love to be present in your marriage. But I warn you, everyone who's ever tried it knows it's excruciating. It's a sacrifice. But that's what it takes to turn hell into heaven. It takes an excruciating act of forgiving love. And our New Testament passage says that on a cosmic scale, that's what God has done for us. This is love, it says, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. On the cross, Jesus was the lover who swallowed his pride. He was in the right, but he didn't claim his rights. We were in the wrong, but he didn't pay back. He absorbed the hell and didn't dish it out. That's why Jesus died. It was a sacrifice, the sacrifice of forgiving love. And you know, he didn't die for anything he could get out of it. Jesus did not get an honorary doctorate for dying. He gave up his life. He sacrificed his life for us. And so our New Testament passage goes on. Dear friends, since God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. We ought to receive the forgiving love of God offered in Jesus and pass it on to a world which desperately needs the redeeming power of love. It's the love that comes from God, the love offered at the cross of Jesus, the love that is shared with a loveless and unlovely world. This reconciling, redeeming love that begins in God will transform your soul, transform your marriage, transform your world. Friends, we all want to believe in love, and when we look to this royal wedding, it almost makes us believe the fairy tale is true, doesn't it? I mean, almost. We could almost forget the darkness of the world and the darkness of our hearts and believe again, couldn't we? Well, I'm here to tell you the fairy tale is true. Love is real, more real than you know. There is a Prince of Heaven who has loved us, fought to the death for us, forgiven our lovelessness, and now he offers the power to live in love. This is the power on which to found every marriage, the power to redeem the world. Its source is God, and his arms are open today. Megan, Harry, God love you, God bless you, and may we all find rest in those arms of almighty love. That's what I'd say, using mainly Michael Careys' words, where I was holding on to the cup, and then filling in the blanks as I see them. Two thoughts on this exercise. Some of the words that Careys did say were extraordinary, especially when people were just expecting a bishop to shuffle on and shuffle off, having mouthed a few platitudes. Careys did not do that, and he gripped a global audience with some glorious truths. When Christians rejoice to hear those truths, we can understand it, and we should assume that it is their love for Jesus that drives them. At the same time, there were other words Careys would need to say if this was going to be a gospel sermon, a sermon proclaiming Christ given for sinners. In the livecast, we will discuss the overlapping contexts of Careys' sermon. It is a church service, and it is a civic ceremony, and it is a global television event. So the rules and expectations are not straightforward. But if what we're expecting was a law and gospel proclamation, then we did not get that last Saturday. The sermon began extremely biblically and theologically and Christ-centeredly, but it did then fly off largely untethered and could be confused at points with a Beatles-like ode to love, love, love. So when Christians become deeply concerned that the second half of Careys' sermon will be the take-home message and that a rhapsody on love is being understood as the gospel, we can understand that, and we can assume that for those Christians it is their love of Jesus that drives them. Careys' sermon has been and gone, but the words of 1 John remain. Let the love of Jesus drive us. Dear friends, let's love one another, for love comes from God. It's May 29th this week, and you're watching the livecast.
Livecast, welcome to the livecast, welcome to the show. Livecast, welcome to the livecast, welcome to the show.
Right, so we're on. What were we even talking about?
What were we even talking about? We're talking
Camping
about...
is bad, according to you. I like camping. Camping's fine.
So I was just saying that I've come back from the Catalyst Festival, where I was preaching and doing a seminar and speaking to some youth, and Emma was doing a seminar as well, and that was great, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, it was very much a camping holiday.
And you're not down with it.
I'm not down with camping, and I don't know who would be down with camping.
It's just fun, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, you've had some time to now think of a single benefit to camping. Have you come up with one?
Communing with the great outdoors.
With Gaia, with Mother Earth herself. What? I get Abraham. Abraham did it,
isn't it?
Right?
So it's good because, so one thing, like when I went to New Wine, interestingly, what I would say most people at New Wine are searching for, a controversial comment of the day coming. People at New Wine, majority of people, the thing they're seeking the most is not God.
Oh.
It is somewhere to plug their phone in. I was amazed by how many people were just like, I can't survive without my phone. Whereas, we've got one of those battery pack things.
Yes.
So, I put my phone on, battery saver and just check it, every now and again. But, I've got no reason to be on Facebook or anything like that. And you're just like, this is quite nice, actually.
Yeah.
Cut off from, all those distractions.
Right.
Whereas some people are just like, we can't Snapchat each other. What are we going to do? Admittedly, they were teenagers, but some of the adults were very got to get my phone charged and,
You're taking this in an interesting direction. What are the benefits of camping? Well, it's not social media.
Yeah. He says on social media. No.
Yeah, okay.
So you know,
getting away from it all.
Yeah, getting away from it all. Yeah,
in many
unplugging
senses,
a little
unplugging.
bit. Yeah. And also, I mean, like, so when you make, like, do you like toast?
Sometimes.
Yeah. You just think toast's all right, isn't it? Yeah.
Toast's all right.
Toast. Let me tell you, toast tastes 10 times better when you've had to make it under that little grill.
Wow. Yeah.
Because not only I think it tastes better under a proper grill anyway.
Yes.
But there's a sense of satisfaction that you've achieved that. Same with making a cup of tea.
You just want to throw your toaster out, wouldn't you? Like,
Absolutely.
That's how good it is.
As we have done. Yes, we've got rid of it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I am just worried that our 3-year-old will enjoy camping too much. So
it is a bit expensive though, camping. Like the initial outlay of like getting a tent and all the gubbins.
Yeah.
But some people there was a guy last year from our church who had I kid you not, a gas oven.
Right.
That he brought with him. Like,
yes.
So you know, not like just a little hob.
No.
Not like the hob, but an oven.
Actual
with
oven
hobs on the top. They did pizzas.
Wow.
Like, you just think, man, that's what happens when you've got more money than...
Glamping. That's what we need. We need a bit of glamping. Ben Bissett says, try camping with 4 kids. No thanks, Ben. No thank you. I'm always reminded of Jim Gaffigan's line. Like, he's a comedian in the States, and he's got 5 kids, and he was asked, like, what's it like going from 4 to 5? Like he says, imagine that you're drowning, and then someone hands you a baby. It's like, yep.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. And Biddy says, you were great talking last night. Thank you, Biddy. Yeah, I was...
your stuff from Catalyst is actually on our page somewhere, isn't it?
It's on the Speak Life page. If you haven't liked the Speak Life page, what are you doing with yourself? Take a good look in the mirror. Question your priorities. And the Speak Life page will have that link to, my sermon on Galatians chapter 4 last night, and also, I mean, so one of the highlights for me was I met a couple of different people from different churches in the Catalyst network, and I've preached in those different churches before, and 2 different people from 2 different churches said, hey, I brought a friend to a guest event that you spoke at, and they've been kind of coming to church ever since, and now, like, one of them's not just become a Christian, but they're now going out on the streets, like, literally, like, within a matter of months.
Wow.
They're out there sharing the good news of Jesus. Another guy said that a work colleague came along to a Christmas carols thing, and they are now going on with the Lord. And then I was having a coffee with somebody, and I'd just done a seminar on how can a good God allow a bad world.
Yep.
Which is something that we've done quite a lot of, and you can check out on the Speak Life page our Thorny Questions videos, and I did a lot of that material, and she just came up to me and said, sorry to interrupt, my name's Jenny, I came to this conference not as a Christian, and my big issue was how can a good God allow a bad world, and you just took away any like objection I could possibly have. I gave my life to Christ last night, and I'm a one-day-old Christian.
Wow,
so
there you go.
How fun is that?
It's like this preaching thing actually works.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And it is interesting because because I'm always tempted to say, oh look, apologetics is it has its place like way over in a corner somewhere.
Yeah.
But she's kind of the real test case that apologists love in terms of people have a series of objections and you need to help them to get over those hurdles. And
once you've removed the objections,
then they go.
Lo and behold.
And of course, we all know it's more complicated than that, including the apologists. But for her, it's pretty much her journey.
Yeah, I guess that's what she would say. What she did say.
Yeah. So praise God. Praise God
brilliant.
for Jenny, and got to pray with another couple last night who were very much on the cusp, and prayed with them for Jesus to reveal Himself to them, and there was lots of prayer going on in a room that size.
Yeah.
Thousands. So you can check out the sermon there on our Speak Life page.
Yeah.
Brilliant. What have you been up to, Paul?
Well, over the bank holiday.
Yeah.
Nothing of real note. I mean, yesterday I had a very nice day yesterday with lots of friends. We just had a barbecue and people around, and there were kids everywhere and paddling pools, and Tortoise was on the loose and all kinds of things.
Tortoise was on the loose.
Yeah, my parents-in-law have a tortoise that we're looking after while they're away.
Wow.
But
is that a needy creature?
Not really.
No.
They're a good creature. I recommend a tortoise as a pet. So, but
really?
the problem is you've got to remember that there's a tortoise. Like,
it's easy to
because I mean, so I did hear. I think it was my brother-in-law who had some friends. I think it was him who said that they were looking through their parents' attic,
right,
and they found a tortoise shell. And when they said to their mum and dad, "We found this in the attic," mum and dad said, "Oh yeah, we did have a tortoise." It's just, you know, when you put them in hibernation for like half a year, it slips from your mind, doesn't it? So you think,
oh man,
we've been up there for a while, and you think, what a way to go. But you know,
how many kids do we have again?
But yeah, this tortoise, Carmen is her name. Carmen the tortoise. She's they're quite quick actually. But anyway, they're low maintenance. Yeah, don't have to do a lot. But yeah, that was pretty much what I did. Yesterday.
Do the kids like them?
Oh yeah, they're very excited about the tortoise and picking up the tortoise and whatnot. So,
do you think other animals would play well with the tortoise? Like, maybe not.
I don't really know. I've not really seen much tortoise kind of and other animal interaction. Anyway, really, I'm not sure how they interact in the wild.
I guess I've been put off having a tortoise because I had a good friend at school and he was just in pieces one day because his mother had pierced the tortoise with her high heel.
No.
All the way through.
No. Man.
And
this is like tortoise. Are there any tortoises listening? This is like a tortoise horror story, isn't it, today?
Does anyone online have a tortoise horror story that you'd like to share with us?
No. But yeah, so I mean, it wasn't an eventful. Oh, I preached actually. I preached on Friday night.
I heralded the voice of the living Christ.
I have a very short memory. This is why I can't keep the tortoise, because I would forget.
Yes.
You know, so we just look after it. I preached on Friday night on Philippians 2, 5-11.
Oh wow!
And
that's a Carmen as well. It's Carmen Christi. The Carmen means him. So you called your tortoise him, and then you preached on the Carmen Christi. Anyway,
that's right.
Great segue, Glen.
How did you know? Yeah, well done. Yeah, so we're part of a series on the Trinity, actually. We're doing it at our cafe church on Friday night, and so this was more looking at the Son. Actually, I think I used something I'd used in an assembly at a secondary school a few years ago. When I say I reused it, I rejigged it quite a bit. But I thought initially about... I used this scenes from the Avengers Assemble with Loki as the god who comes to bring you the gift of freedom. He come to free you from freedom. And you kneel before me, you crave subjugation, and you know, all that kind of stuff. And I said, you know, what is God like? What is the nature of God? And this is Josh Whedon's view of God. You know, the humanist, here he is, and this, you know, God is this. Who's the bad guy here? God comes to earth to subjugate and to oppress, and to hold on to power, to be the power God. And then we talked about, you know, well, actually, what's the nature of God? It's a self-giving sacrifice, stepping down, not clinging to power. Giving of self for the sake of others, and actually at the end talking about even when Jesus is exalted to the highest place, even then he doesn't cling to power like some kind of obsessed ruler, because at the end of Revelation, or not end of Revelation, in Revelation you have Jesus inviting us onto the throne with him, not saying get off the throne, I'm in charge, that kind of thing.
Amazing.
So that and tortoises. That was my weekend.
Those are your two Carmens. That sounds great. Oh, was it recorded?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, it was, but we had a few technical issues. It's not like
Really?
not like us to have technical issues, is it? Like,
You shocked me.
so I think the guy came up to me afterwards and said, he said, yeah, I'll do something. He said, I've got all of it somewhere, the recording bits. He said, but at the moment it jumps from the scene about Loki, literally the recording of that, to you just coming and going, lording it over us, like that. He's like, probably not, like, just need some context. So
Very good. No, I'd like to hear that. And we might get into these issues as we speak, especially about a kind of a theology of the cross and what Ireland's referendum kind of means. We might get back to those Philippians 2 themes in a minute, but I started with a little monologue on the wedding sermon, and if you haven't checked out what I said last week, that again is in the comments section of this live video on Facebook. You can check out what I said last week, and this week I guess I tried something a bit different, which was just to put flesh on the bones of what would it look like to preach a sermon that included the stuff that we like. And by we, I kind of mean gospel-loving, you could use the word evangelical, Orthodox Christians. What would it look like to have Michael Careys' words and the words that we love? And so I had a go at that. And maybe I'm now opening myself up to the charge that, my own words are, inadequate and, should be rejected. But it seems to me on this issue, there's kind of red, amber, and green responses to Michael Careys' sermon, and I understand all of them. Like, I understand the red light response, which is people could definitely get the wrong idea from Michael Careys' sermon. I personally don't think he preached heresy. I don't. I'm only going by the 13 minutes that he preached, but just looking at those 13 minutes, I don't think he preached heresy. And if he did, and if you could convince me that he did, I'd denounce it. I would, I promise. But I don't think in those 13 minutes he preached heresy. No. But I understand that people can think that you could get the wrong idea from that. And if people go away thinking that the gospel is just a Beatles-like love, 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 like if that is what people now assume the gospel is because of his sermon, I understand your red light, and I think it's coming from a good place, right? And so, it doesn't make anybody a priggish Pharisee if they want to give the red light to Michael Careys' sermon. I assume that it's coming from a place of deep love for Jesus. So, yay, that. And then there's the green light response, and the green light response is, hey, 2 billion people, and he heralded Jesus, so let's just rejoice. And so you did get people who were just saying, well, that's the gospel, and if that's not the gospel, I don't know what is. And I think last week I was trying to give an amber response. I think it was an amber response, because I flagged up several warnings, like, I don't think he should have been there. I said that 3 times in my little 7-minute talk. 3 times, beginning, middle, and end. I said he shouldn't have been there, and because of his stance on marriage, because of TEC, the Episcopal Church, and its sanctions by the Anglican Communion about marriage, and because of the way TEC has handled Bible-loving brothers and sisters across the pond. So I certainly do not give a free pass to any of this, and I don't think the sermon words themselves ought to be called the gospel, pure and simple. So I don't think I'm green, I don't think I'm red, I think I am kind of amber, and as amber I think I kind of, got likes from red and green people and got dislikes from red and green people.
I think it was pretty, in terms of people's response, there was a mixture, but I mean, I think a lot of people did see it as relatively balanced. I think it was, I think that's the case, isn't it? But
and like one thing I do want to say is that the red light people are right, that it is important to define what the gospel is and isn't. I think that's a slightly different argument from whether this particular event was the event for preaching law and gospel in its fullest sense. I think that should be a separate argument, but if this sermon is an occasion for us to going back to basics and thinking, what is the gospel? Then let's do that. Let's do that with grace and love, and let's figure out what the gospel is. And I think it was not the gospel, I think it was the law. To use a Lutheran and Reformed kind of categorization, I don't think it was anti-gospel, I just think it was the law. I think it was love your neighbor. This love comes from God, now let's love your neighbor. And, so I think it was just the law and not the gospel. But therefore, I think the challenge is not just for Michael Carey to now go on ahead and preach law and gospel. I think the challenge is for everybody. And I think our own tribe, and I identify as evangelical in our own tribe, I think we need to go further than just the law, and we need to go further than just holding to correct doctrines. Because whatever the gospel is, or whatever proclaiming the gospel is not just holding to and articulating correct doctrines. Proclaiming the gospel is offering Christ to sinners. And certainly, I don't think Michael Carey in the fullest sense did that, certainly. But if he should have, good, then we should as well. And maybe there's a few fingers pointing back at us in terms of, do we preach law and gospel and offer Christ in these different settings? And then, and then one other thing I think it's worth saying is the question of the context of this sermon. Like, is it a church service? Yes. Is it a civic ceremony? Yes. Is it a global televisual event watched by billions? Yes. And those overlapping contexts are complicated, and it's not obvious. I don't think it's entirely obvious what the rules are for someone who is preaching to billions on TV as well as in a chapel to some royals. You know? And clearly, Michael Carey did not take it as an opportunity to preach to people in the chapel. If he did, if his job was to preach to the royals, you know, the looks on some of their faces showed that he might have missed his target, right? Yep. And if he was preaching to the couple, he barely mentioned the couple. Yeah. Right. Clearly, he was taking this as an opportunity with a global audience, I think. And I just think, you know, for myself as a preacher, I get, you know, brought in by churches, and they will put on an event for me to speak at, and quite often, you know, they will say, you know, evangelicals of impeccable pedigree have said to me, Glenn, don't go full on for the gospel, just you know, rein it in. And usually I don't listen to them, and usually I just preach the gospel, right? I'm that kind of guy. Red light people, hear me. I'm that kind of guy. You invite me to your church and you say, oh, it's more of an amber event, and don't go fully for the gospel. I go green light on those, okay? So I don't, you know, quit the hate, man. You know, I do take those opportunities and preach the gospel. But I've had evangelicals of impeccable pedigree telling me, look, rein it in, Glenn, because it's not that kind of event. Now, if that is you know, if that's an okay thing to do, then I think we need to think again about the context in which Michael Carey was preaching. Because, yeah, it's a church service, but, yeah, it's also a civic ceremony in which a bishop is just meant to shuffle on and shuffle off and mouth some platitudes. And it's a global televisual event. And I just don't think the rules are that obvious for what he was meant to do. As you'll see at the top of the show, if I had that opportunity, I would pray for the courage to say those 6 minutes the way that I said those 6 minutes. And that's what I think would most honor Jesus in that setting, even though it might not be as popular as Michael Carey's sermon. That's personally what I think. But if there are evangelicals who are listening into Michael Carey's sermon and they go, hey, you know, Christ is preached and I rejoice, Philippians 1 verse 18, you know, I see their heart and I honor them. I honor your heart, red light Christians, and I honor your heart, green light Christians. Can't we just get along? You know? Where's the love?
Well, I think you're right there, aren't you? About it, there is a context. There is a context question, and I mean, it was a very different thing to, you know, the platform he was on, the occasion he was at was not a Billy Graham, right? You know, crusade in the stadium type thing, right? And we were joking earlier about how strange it would have been, you know, how amusing it would have been if he'd said, like, and if anyone wants to give their life to the Lord, to, you know, just stand up in this room, like, you know,
every head bow,
come to
every
the front,
eye closed, like, just raise your hand if you want to receive Christ. I see you, Your Majesty. I see you, Your Grace. Thank you, Jesus. You know,
we've got a couple of little books we're going to give you to tell you about Jesus. You know, that would not have been the right time and place. The time and the place for it, undoubtedly. And, you know, we talked earlier about, you know, you would preach in a different way to your context, wouldn't you? Yeah. You know, I definitely would. I'd take the same passage, and if I knew I was preaching to my Sunday morning congregation, I think it's predominantly Christians. It's a church crowd. Right. I would preach the passage in a different way than I would with an evangelistic event or whatever. You know, you'd still have the same stuff, but there's a context. So, like when I did assemblies in secondary schools, you know, you've got to, you know, you're in a sense you're playing your cards very carefully as well, without wanting to. You don't want to water anything down. No. And you don't want to pull your punches, but you want to do it in a way that means you'll be invited back. And
yeah. We all know about that. We all know that there's ways of contextualizing our message, and you know, I've taken many weddings, and I've taken weddings where I know the couple and I know that they are Christian, and I've taken couples when I don't really know the couple and they're not Christians, and you preach a little bit differently. Like, you really do, you know, and you know, if they're known to you as a couple, and if they want you to preach the gospel in a certain way, you say, and I often take advantage of that, I say, you know, Bill and Brenda want you to know that this is just a picture of the ultimate love. Theirs is not the ultimate love. They want you to know that. They've told me to tell you, you know, and so you can say that with a lot more freedom. That, you know, if you don't know the couple, and Michael Carey did not know the couple, and if you're flown in from across an ocean, you know, there are different contexts, and once again, I think politically it was the wrong move to bring him into that situation, all of that. But I just think, actually, you know, going through his words in order to kind of re-preach his sermon, it really struck me what a sermon of two halves it was, you know.
Yeah.
And the first half, I don't think there would be any complaints from evangelicals if he sat down after 6 minutes, which was what he was meant to do, 6 minutes. And we would all say, well, he didn't have time to go into, you know, penal substitutionary atonement or whatever, you know. But those first 6 minutes, my goodness, he goes from this prayer in the triune name of God's scripture. Jesus said, "Love God and love your neighbor." Then the balm of Gilead's, and literally, and by that stage, it was about 6 minutes. And if he'd sat down, we would just be like, "Wow, wow." Yeah. I think the problem was the second half just sort of launched off. And rhetorically, that probably is what gripped people and made people sit up and listen. But that rhetorical flourish was then not so tethered to the stuff that he said in the first half. And in the first half, he insists a number of times that the source of love is God. But then it gets untethered, and then, you know, you could uncharitably think that he is just rhapsodizing about love itself. And then if people get the impression that that's the gospel, I hear you, that's a problem. But, you know, maybe stick to time, preachers. Maybe that's the maybe that's the lesson.
Maybe so.
Yeah. Anyway, have we said enough? Have we said more than enough?
Who knows?
Let's just can we love each other? I don't think this is an occasion for splitting among Christians who love the gospel. I think there are good gospel reasons for being a red light person, and I think there are good gospel reasons for being a green light person.
Yep.
So there we go. There we go. Other things to comment on in the news. Biddy has said, "The faces of the church persons behind him!" ! I know. Those faces, though.
That's what makes me love it all the more, though. Is that subversive streak in me that can see the squirming, and I just think,
Princess Beatrice, like, is he allowed to say this? Who authorized this? Yeah. Elton John.
Oh yeah, brilliant. And Victoria Beckham, but you know.
Oh, I don't know. I don't think I've seen her.
She didn't look very impressed, but I think that might just be what she always looks like.
And and David Beckham was just sniggering through the whole thing, which is
I couldn't tell whether he liked it though, David Beckham, because he kind of smiling away, but whether he was or whether it was genuinely like, oh, like.
Yeah.
You just don't know what's going on, do you?
You never know. In a footballer's mind. Another thing. So, have you seen this in the news? There was this story about a boy who was hanging off a balcony in Paris on like the 4th, 5th story.
A toddler.
A toddler.
Kind of, very young.
Yeah, very young. And for some reason, the people who were like on that level couldn't.
Like, it was a bit unusual, wasn't that? Bringing that part was strange.
But this guy, he's from Mali, a migrant to France.
Scales the wall like a Spider-Man, yeah.
Up he goes, and saves the toddler. And everyone in France has gone nuts for this guy, and like he's got a job as a fireman
or something. Yeah, he's being made a French citizen or something as well, isn't he? Or...
like, hey, do you know how to put out a fire? No, but I can climb up the building. It's like, all right. I would hope that
they're giving some training.
They have
hopefully.
I hope
a bit of
so.
training.
I hope so. Their policies are a bit more rigorous.
As he scales the thing with his hose in his hand, it's like, no, you can use the ladder.
It's just like, I'm sure there is overlap between the skills of someone who can climb and someone who can put out fires, but it's like someone's really good at a Rubik's Cube. Make that man a police officer. It's like, okay. But he was also like sort of adopted as a citizen of France, wasn't he?
It was great.
So great story, and then David Lammy MP, Labour MP. He's a Labour MP, isn't he? Surely. Yes.
I think he
Yes,
is.
Labour
I
MP
think
for
he's-
Tottenham.
I think he's Labour.
And, he's definitely Labour. He's an MP. And his tweet, should we have it up on the screen?
Yep,
It
hopefully
said,
it's going to come up. Here we go.
"This is a wonderful story, but I don't think that migrants should have to behave like superheroes before they are treated like human beings. Being a human being should be the only prerequisite to being treated like a human being. And that applies in the UK just as much as in France, just as much as in the womb."
Oof.
Oh, there's my mic drop. Okay, so makes a brilliant point here. Like, you shouldn't have to climb up and be a superhero in order to be treated like a human being.
Yep.
Agreed. Let's all agree that. And now let's turn our attention to Ireland and the referendum. And it seems to me that's the kind of the headline under which we should see all other things. That really, if you want to call it the pro-life position, let's call it the pro-life position. The pro-life position is, in the words of David Lammy, no one should have to behave like a superhero before they are treated like a human being. Being a human being should be the only prerequisite to being treated like a human being. And that applies just as much in the womb as it does outside of it. It's exactly the logic. And I think what this David Lammy tweet does is it really shows that I think the pro-choice argument, if you want to call it that, really is underlying it. You need to climb up to a certain level before you will be treated to the same levels of hospitality and humanity that the rest of us are. You need to have a certain level of consciousness. You need to be in a certain position before we will afford to you all the rights and all the hospitality that we should offer to a human being. So I often find that as an interesting way in and an interesting parallel in discussions about abortion, because on the whole, people who tend to be pro-choice also tend to be pro-migration, pro-immigration, right? And I just want to say, okay, let's use that instinct that you have, that someone should not be asked to jump through 17 hoops before you afford them hospitality. In the same way, let's not let our brothers and sisters in the womb have to jump through all these hoops before we afford them the right to life. I think that is the basic argument. But on Friday there was the referendum, and it was about repealing, or at least amending, the Eighth Amendment of the Irish Constitution. The Eighth Amendment in the Irish Constitution says, "The state acknowledges the right to life of the unborn, and with due regard to the equal right to life of the mother, guarantees in its laws to respect and as far as practicable by its laws to defend and vindicate that right." So it seems to me that is a pretty plain statement that when we're talking about abortion, we're talking about two lives and not one. We're not just talking about one person's autonomous choice. We're talking about two people. And in terms of repealing that Eighth Amendment or amending that amendment, what was voted yes to on Friday by a ratio of 2-1, Irish people wanted to add this amendment, which is provision may be made by law for the regulation of termination of pregnancies. And so now the door is open to legislation that allows for the termination of pregnancies without having to pass it through the filter of there are two lives here. So it seems to me at that point, to go back to the migration example, that it seems at that point that we've built a wall and we've made the fetus pay for it, right? We've built a wall and we've made the unborn pay. And they have got to get over a hurdle in order to be afforded that right. So legislation is not the way, I think, to bring the kingdom. It's absolutely not the way to bring the kingdom. And And I really respect those kind of pro-life ministries and charities that say we don't want to make abortion illegal so much as to make it unthinkable. I think that's absolutely right, and I think it's a battle for hearts and minds. It's not a battle for the statute books. But I guess the loss of this battle in Ireland means like we need to look at ourselves as Christians and say, how is it that we can tell the story of Jesus again that makes people wake up to the beauty of life and the beauty of the little people, you know? It seems like such a triumph of authority and power and individuality and choice over the little guy. And it just seems to me that so many of the people who support the pro-choice cause, they also believe in not harming the little guy and championing the little guy. How do we make people love the little guy and see that it's a cause for championing life, and
Yeah. I mean, I wish I knew. It just it's a very hard thing to understand. I think, at least from my perspective. That as I read that initial Eighth Amendment, I think, wow, that's a really affirming and good thing. That seems a very kind of good, almost a compromise between two things. You have a right.
Right.
This child has a right. There are two people involved here.
Yeah.
And they both have rights, and there needs to be a way for this to work together. And to step away from that seems a strange thing. A very dark thing, really.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is.
It is difficult, and we need to remember that 1 in 3 women in the UK at least will have had an abortion, and it's a personal issue, and it's and I totally accept that no woman takes that decision lightly, and I totally accept that no woman takes that, and that there are all sorts of complicated factors at play, but what I struggle to see is when we see people cheering, like really cheering for this. And, there have been 8.8 million abortions in this country since 1967. 8.8 million. And it's even if you're on that side and you win that debate, it's always a tragedy, isn't it? It's always...
You'd hope so. You'd hope that would be the view, and that's why to see people standing there, arms in the air, feels strange. I mean, because it really, ultimately, it just comes back. It comes down to the simple thing, isn't it? You either think there is a life,
right?
It is a life, or it's not. That is ultimately at the root of it,
right?
And if you think it's a life, then why would why would you feel that was? You wouldn't want to rejoice in it, if you lost, if you had an abortion, or you'd lost a child, in the womb, I don't think you'd want to rejoice, yes, this is a empowering thing,
because it's meant to be, and the catchphrase is always safe, legal, and rare. So in the pro-choice case, we think that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare.
Yeah.
But the rare thing it's not, is it?
No.
In the UK, 500 a day. That's not rare. 500 a day is not rare. 8.8 million.
And I think I've always thought, I say always thought, I've wondered sometimes, if I was in a position where I actually had power to do something, to make legislation, would I just say no abortions? Well, and I think as a Christian, I find that a difficult one, because the reality is people would go and get backstreet abortions and whatnot, but it strikes me that there are medical cases, aren't there, where it's very much something has gone terribly wrong here, and mum's gonna die unless we do something, and there are cases for stepping in, and I think we need to weigh those, but I'm not sure again that those are the majority of cases that actually for a lot of people it's like I didn't want it at that stage for whatever reason.
Right.
And I think, and again, I mean, I'm not well versed in the abortion debate, but stuff I've heard from a lot of, I've heard people say, figures talking about it, saying the issue with a lot of arguments you make about why abortion is okay, you could equally apply that to a grown adult.
Right.
Something happened,
Right.
I didn't feel I was, just take a really simple one, like they couldn't afford to have a child. Well, people lose their jobs when they've got children.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean, well, now I can get rid of my child,
Right.
But equally, like you say, I would never condemn anyone that's had an abortion. I wouldn't want to be like, you are a terrible person or anything. I'd want to love that person. But I think it's a deeply heartbreaking thing.
Yeah.
To hear that someone has happened,
Yeah. I guess I would think that, and I do think that such a person has been caught up in an evil that is bigger than them, and swept along in it, and that the evil that is bigger than that individual case really is evil. I do think it is.
And it all gets caught up in this identity thing again, like, oh, you're a man, so you don't get to have a say in it. You don't have control over what I do in my body, maybe.
Right.
But then, surely you could just flip that and say, well, you're not a baby. You don't get the say in.
Right.
Well, so it just feels like a very bad place to be in.
Yeah. And so then how do we talk about it with our friends who don't understand where we're coming from and who think that surely the side of progress is, it's sweeping Europe and this last stronghold, the south of Ireland, it's been swept away, and surely Northern Ireland is next, and then the sweep of progress. How do we have conversations where we say, no, this is not progress? And I mean, one thing I did is I tweeted out the other day. There was a video that was on Sky News about people cheering this amendment that was made, and my tweet just said that the year is 2050. Our grandchildren ask us, did they really cheer? What were they thinking? And we will tell them, they thought it was choice, and no one will be able to fathom it. And because I don't know, I don't think it's at all obvious that in 30 years' time we will understand our views on abortion today. I don't think it is at all obvious that the pro-choice argument will be in
and I mean, I've heard a few people say that with the march of scientific discovery, actually it's very possible we'll find more and more evidence to support the idea that actually this is a life from much earlier. Scans. And people from people 100 years down the line or 50 years, whatever, may even look back with horror that we would have ever done it. And yet at the moment we're indignant. We'd be indignant that someone would deny the right to do that. Which there's an ever shifting. That's the moral tide of society, isn't it? Is ever shifting sands.
But they want to portray it as this onward march of progress. Yeah. And Christians are holding people back, and now they're just being swept aside, and I would just.
And I mean, I think the question I mean, you said, how do we talk to people about this? How do we retell the story? And I'm not sure I've got an easy answer. I'm not sure quite how to begin. But just in terms of when I've talked to people about things, I've just wanted to say, well, when does it start, and try and pin people.
When does life
begin? Start? Because is it okay at this stage, that stage? Yeah. And obviously everybody, even on different sides of this, people on the pro-choice side, even they're on a massive spectrum of. Some people have been saying up to birth, basically. Yeah. Or beyond, like Peter Singer would be, up to like age 3 or something. And it's just trying to define, well, what is life? And I remember, someone said to me, well, what would you do if you're in a the clinic, and there's a load of embryos and there's a fire and there's a load of babies, who'd you save? Right. And I kind of said, well, you know what, in the heat of the moment, which is not a pun, I was like, I don't know what I would do. I said I'd probably grab the babies, because I think I would know, I know what to do with a baby. I don't know anything about embryos, whether I would even survive if I whipped them out of cold storage. I don't know how it works. I said, I said, but that doesn't prove either way whether one is life or not. That just, because someone else might make a different decision on that. Someone else might go embryos straight away. you know, and that doesn't answer the question. It just shows that we all have different views on what life is.
Yeah.
And you know, and he asked a similar question about, you know, if you know, your wife is pregnant, etc., etc., what would you do? And something happened, and again I said, you know, well, we'd have to see what the situation was. You know, if it was a case of mother child,
right,
you know, we'd have to weigh that up, but it would be a great source of sadness for us,
right,
to have to do something, to save, you know, maybe mum's life. I said, but again, regardless of my choice on that, that still doesn't even, that has no real bearing on the question of whether that is a life or not.
It's a life,
because whether you choose one way or the other makes no difference to whether that's life. And again, it was like, oh, well, the law says. Well, it doesn't matter what the law says in one sense, because the law can be wrong.
And the law shifts as it has done, as it is set to do in Ireland.
The law said, you know, slavery was cool. You know, homosexuality should be punished. You know, by, you know, prison time and whatnot. And I don't think any of us would go, well, that was the law, and therefore it was right then.
Therefore
you
know.
So it's trying to define where it is, but of course that's a different set of arguments to let's paint a big picture of a gospel picture of a, you know, a God and Jesus and you know, God who loves us and creates us in the womb, and that's a different thing.
I mean, this really had a big bearing on us. Before I say that, Richard Blaney has just commented, in Ireland people weren't convinced by abortion statistics or by brilliant images of the unborn being formed. They argued that abortion is already happening, and they want unrestricted access. The chance to break off from the control of the Catholic Church or others who tell them no was an added attraction. So that's safe, legal, and rare was a big part of the argument that carried the day. But I mean, this, these issues are very personal to Emma and I. We did a modified IVF process 6 times, and the modification was we wanted to attempt to fertilize just 1 egg at a time. We don't want to try to fertilize 12 and then have to, you know, discard 11 that, you know, and that sort of thing. And then we were therefore left in a very difficult moral position because there was one embryo that did fertilize, and instantly it was obvious that this child, and I will call them a child, was triploidy, which is a chromosomal disorder where instead of just having 1 extra chromosome, you've got a whole 23 extra chromosomes. So, you know, like Down syndrome is 1 extra chromosome. This is 23 extra chromosomes. This is like, and the kind of fetal abnormalities of triploidy babies are pretty intense, and, you know, no child has survived more than a day or 2 outside the womb and that sort of thing. And so we were told by our fertility clinic that, okay, it's over. That's it. It hasn't worked, and it actually took us a while to figure out that the embryo had fertilized, but they were refusing to place the embryo back into Emma, and so we had to really fight for them to put the embryo back into Emma, and with the full knowledge that if this child, you know, develops to full term, there could be all sorts of abnormalities and all that kind of stuff, and so you don't take that kind of decision lightly at all. But the whole thing that was sort of motivating us was just, we think, okay, here is a completely distinct entity that is not dad, it is not mum, it is some completely new rejigging of our genetic material, a distinct human life. There he or she is, and so we have a sick child. So what do we now do with a sick child? We try to take care of that sick child, and we sounded like nuts to this fertility clinic. They said no one has ever done this. You know, literally, people were saying no one has ever in the history of IVF, which has been going for 30-40 years, no one has ever transferred a triploidy baby back into a womb. And we were like, okay, well, call us nuts, but for us, you know, the gospel is all about God loving the little guy. So much he became the little guy. And he became the little guy in the womb. And we believe in the virgin conception of Jesus, that the Holy Spirit overshadowed Mary, and that Jesus was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary. So Jesus was Jesus from conception. It's part of the creed. It's right there in the Gospels. So what we have on our hands with this child was we have a sick child, and now how do we care for this sick child? And the guy in charge of the fertility center just didn't have any idea how to cope with us. He just thought we were totally nuts. And so we got into the issue of, well, where do you think life begins? And he said, I couldn't possibly say. And I said, well, even if you can't say, if I literally gave him this analogy. I said, if we were in this clinic and somehow the clinic has to come down, we have to demolish the clinic. There are explosives, there are charges set all around the building. We have to bring it down in order to build a new wing. And let's say we're all outside in the car park, and I've got the button to press to detonate, to get rid of this building, and I send you into the building to scout out to see if there's anyone in there. And you come back after having scouted out the entire wing of the hospital, and I say, is there any life in there? And you say, I don't think so. Should I press the button? He just moved the conversation on.
Yeah.
I don't think that's answerable.
No.
I don't know whether it's life is not an argument for therefore press the button and detonate.
It amazes me that someone in that position could say, I don't think I can answer that. Part
Right.
of me would want to say, is it not your job to
Right.
answer that? Like,
Right.
would that not be an integral part of what you do
Right.
to know what is life and what's not?
Right.
If you're particularly if you're making a decision
Right.
between this one's good to go,
Yeah.
this is not,
Yeah.
you better know
Right.
what's life and what's not.
Right.
Otherwise you might just be chucking a load of stuff away.
A lot of it is chucking a lot of stuff away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
we had the thing of a few weeks ago when we had this ectopic pregnancy,
Yeah.
and we didn't, which was a complete shock to us. And when they kind of said this is what's happening, we didn't really know kind of what was going on. But the first thing running through my head was when they were saying, we've got to do this operation and remove the tube and whatnot, was really like, well, what's the ethical?
Right.
I'm not sure I thought of it in that way, not quite as, what's the ethical implications? But
Yeah.
there was no information in the sense of
Right.
what is going to happen, where, part of me was saying, well, is this child viable? Can it grow? And actually it was only later that, it became clear that, no, actually this child would never have been viable, and actually Becca was in danger as well, and they said you came at the right time. But I was genuinely only kind of what were we maybe 8 weeks in, thinking well, this is a life,
Sure.
I don't think we should just enter into this lightly.
Yeah.
When they're saying now we're going to do this operation later today, it's well, oh, hang on, do we need to
Right.
put the brakes on a second, because
Yeah.
I'm genuinely concerned that this is a life, and
Right.
are we killing a life here?
Right.
And
Yeah.
we didn't come away from it oh well, never mind. I mean, it's just so genuinely, at some point we'd like another baby,
Yeah.
but I find it hard to think how I could refer to that, if we have another baby, as the third child,
Right.
because I kind of think, well, there was this other child,
Yeah.
but
Right.
it's, and
Yeah.
I hate calling it, but we just don't know what it was,
He, she, yeah.
I think it would just feel strange to be and this is
Yeah.
our third child,
Yeah.
but then there was this child,
Yeah.
and that was at such an early stage, so
Yeah.
I just think there's a lot of stuff at play.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah. We've got 4 little ones that we know of, that we will look forward to embracing in heaven. But I think we do need to resist the language of just fetus and that kind of thing, because no one says when's your fetus due, right?
yeah.
Yeah. And just bring this home to the gospel. What really struck me as we were going through some of this stuff was just how very gospel it is to to love the despised and foolish things of this world. So 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 27 says, God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not, to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him. And, you know, it's a real theology of the cross that says God loves the little guy, God became the little guy, God honors the despised and shameful and weak. And I think the more godly we are as a society, the more we will honor the despised, the shameful, and the weak. And if our society is not ready for that, then legislation is not going to change hearts. Well, we need to get out there and keep on preaching the cross, because only changes of hearts really are going to change society at any deep level. Well, it's 2:07.
Wow,
It's
it's be a record for us.
It is.
And in fairness, we probably spent a good few minutes just trying to get this microphone working.
Miming. Well, guys, thank you so much for being with us. Do continue the conversation in comments if you like. Do like us on Facebook, and then you'll get more of these videos. Subscribe to us on YouTube if you like. And you can get this as an audio download by going to any podcast spitter-outerer. And you can search for the Speak Life podcast and get this. It comes out on Friday.
Should come out Friday. Yep.
Great. Brilliant. And do, if you want to ask more thorny questions, we've just come to the end of a series of thorny questions on suffering. We'd love to address your big issues that you've got about life, the universe, and everything in 5 minutes. Send them our way and we'll have a go.
Yeah. Always good to scratch where people are itching.
Good.
To use the phrase.
Good. Exactly. Well, that's all we got time for today. But thanks everyone, guys, and see you again.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.